You're listening to Wrestling Changed My Life, presented by Spartan Combat. Let's go.
A leader requires the ability to influence, but also put the needs of the organization first.
We can endure anything and adapt and pivot and change. Wrestling gave us that ability.
I would say nothing in life has impacted me more than the things wrestling has taught me in terms of self-reflection, resilience.
Toughness. Some guys have it, some guys don't.
Adversity, 100%. How to pick myself up and be a man after I failed.
And everything that has shaped my life and where I'm at today would not be there without the values and basically the lessons I've learned through the sport of wrestling.
For me, wrestling saved my life because it allowed me to focus and channel my energy.
We're fortunate if you wrestled, because if you wrestled, natural talent helps, but it's 5% of the ingredient. It pales in comparison to heart and technique and effort.
It humbled me, taught me humility. Nothing can humble you more than wrestling. I think it's the learning to adapt, right? You learn how to adapt, you learn how to solve problems.
You know, if I look back at my time I spent wrestling, if it gave me one thing more than anything else, it's mental toughness.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Wrestling Changed My Life podcast. This is your host, Ryan Warner. We have a guest for you today, folks. It's Chance Leonard. Awesome interview, but I got to spend a few minutes on the Olympics. Last night was an incredible round. We had David Taylor, the great Magic Man, on the mat, Thomas Gilman, and Helen Maroulis. And I will say, this is one of the sessions where I was screaming at the TV. I was on the edge of my seat. So here's what happened. David Taylor is assaulting people. He has 3 tech falls in a row and is looking very good. He's going to wrestle Yazdani Chirati, 2016 Olympic gold medalist, 2-time world champ, in the finals Thursday morning, probably around 8 a.m. That's going to be a match of legacy. Taylor and Yazdani have wrestled many times. David Taylor won the last 2, so it's going to be a battle. Helen Maroulis, man, she's battled some adversity since 2016, but she came out guns blazing last night, had a very tough Chinese opponent in the first round. She was losing during the match, comes back, really opens the score. She won her second match as well. And so going into this morning's semifinal round, we were all feeling good. She lost a very tight match, 2-1, to a Japanese wrestler who won the 2016 Olympics. So tough loss for Helen, but she's in the wrestlebacks, should be going for bronze. I believe her next matches are tonight at 9 p.m. Central. Thomas Gilman, folks, came out of the gate swinging against Ugoyev from Russia, who is the 2-time defending world champ. And man, Gilman was winning most of the match up until the last 5 seconds. And then Ugoyev hit this little trip. I don't even know what it was. John Smith didn't know what it was. And Gilman lost a 1-point match, if you will. But the good news is Ugoyev made the finals, as we thought he would. Gilman's pulled back in the wrestlebacks and has a chance for bronze. So it was an awesome night of wrestling. Action resumes tonight at 9 p.m. Central. Kyle Dake and Gable Steveson are going to have their first matches. Cannot wait. All right, folks, let's shift to the interview now. We have Chance Leonard. Chance is the executive producer for The Price of Legacy, a brand new wrestling documentary that chronicles the Perry High School wrestling program out in Perry, Oklahoma. So I didn't know a lot about these guys. Perry, Oklahoma has won the state title 43 times. So they've got something going on out there. And Chance went to Perry. He's a very successful businessman. And now he wanted to highlight this incredible tradition. So please go watch the documentary, The Price of Legacy. It's on YouTube Movies, iTunes, and the Google Play Store. Fan of the Week goes to a couple recent iTunes, Apple Podcast reviews. So if you're listening to this on your iPhone and using the Apple Podcast app, which most of you are, you can leave a review for the show. So I want to give a shout out to 3 folks, D. Zielinski 20, Kira Chris, and Roughneck 165, my man Lucas M. Thank you so much for your kind words. We greatly appreciate it. And without further ado, folks, let's get to the episode with one Chance Leonard. Chance Leonard, welcome to the podcast, sir.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to connect with you.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. So you are the man behind the documentary, The Price of Legacy. Tell me how this all got started.
Number one, great question. I think that if I had to define it in one word, it would be gratitude. And having, the opportunity to have participated in the sport of wrestling at a high school that is committed to the program, committed to the development of kids, and really unleashing the power of the sport through mentorship and through coaching and through, just the participation in the sport and the requirements of it. It was something that I reflected on after a number of years and had the opportunity to do something that I felt like I could give back to the sport. And that's how, in a sense, this was born. There are some more details, I guess I would say, that are specific. And that was, I remember standing at Dan Hodges' ceremony where we were going to dedicate a statue to him, and we were celebrating his lifetime of achievements. And I got to see, several different dignitaries in this group of people that were celebrating him. And I just thought to myself, despite the fact that we're going to create a wrestling monument park in the town of Perry, Oklahoma, I just thought, there's something more that can be done. And that's how the vision came about. And we thought, let's do something that gives maximum visibility to what the sport entails and why it's so important, and, get more people out there to understand what it's all about.
So what's as much about highlighting wrestling as it is telling the Perry story to you?
Absolutely. I personally believe that the Perry story affords the opportunity to tell a bigger story about wrestling, about, as I say, the commitment to it from a group of people that pass it down from generation to generation. And then what the impact of the sport is on kids as they develop, especially at a point in time when they're learning, when hardship sometimes is not as appreciated as it will be later in life. And so that's how this all came about. I never wanted it to be just, Ryan, about the sport of wrestling and a pat on the back for Perry, Oklahoma, which is certainly deserved. But I think we did that well with the creation of the Perry Wrestling Monument Park. But to be able to do something that would give back and tell, like I say, a much bigger story is always at the top of the priority list. And I think that's why we're seeing the success of the film come about, because it reaches a larger audience.
Yeah, it's got that, it just pulls at you nostalgically and reminds you of all the memories that, me and my family have had through the sport. So that it's fun to watch it that way. At the 30,000 foot level, for folks who aren't interested, how would you describe the documentary, like when you're introducing it to Film Fest and people who know nothing about wrestling?
Well, I would start with, number one, people, right? And people that become committed to doing something and doing it with a level of excellence that can be reproduced. I think then it becomes a generational passing of values that, no matter where you sit on a political spectrum, these should be something that's, indigenous to both sides of the fence. And so I think after that, it's a sports story. It shows the hardship, and it shows the dedication. It shows what it takes from a mentality side of things, utilizing the sport and the beauty of what it is. We know that it's one-on-one competition, but it also, that one-on-one competition and that requires and demands excellence, also produces a team output. And I think that in itself, by us being able to tell a story that pulls at heartstrings because you see what it actually takes, is really something that can unify and can bring about awareness to doing something a little bit differently than mainstream sports.
Yeah, and the streak you talk about in the film is pretty incredible. And for someone who's been around wrestling all my life, I did not know about Perry, Oklahoma until I had heard about this documentary, and it was last winter, I think, was the first time I heard about it. But talk a little bit about the wrestling tradition in Perry, Oklahoma.
Well, it is a very unique tradition, to say the least. This year in 2021, moving into 2022, will be the 100-year celebration of the program, which was established in 1922. During that period of time, there's only been a total of 12 head coaches in the Perry Wrestling program. 10 of them have grown up in the program, gone on to wrestle at college, and come back to give to the program in a different way, i.e. coaching and mentoring. And so, we thought that this would be really unique to be able to tell 100-year, century-old legacy of winning tradition with many, many different achievements along the way. So a national record, 43 team state championships since inception. Since 1961, the program has never gone more than 2 years without winning a state title. And that streak has been on the line a total of 6 times since 1961. And so, that's actually really unique. We just last year hit 1,018 dual wins to become the 4th program in the country to have 1,000 dual wins during its tenure.
Wow. And
so since I think 1954, if I remember correctly, the program has averaged 8.8 wrestlers to go and qualify for the state tournament, which is a significant streak in itself. And they've had 20 dual state championships, 19 of them were in a row. And that was recently eclipsed by Tuttle High School. And so, there's been a lot of records that have stood the test of time. But I would tell you that the film really more is about not the gold medals, but how they are won. And I would tell you, these kids, we're not just wrestling an opponent on the mat. We're not just wrestling the inner, voices in our head in order to win, but the responsibility of carrying on a legacy is another element that I think really is unique. And it really tells a great story about what wrestling can produce as a whole.
Yeah, and you had just said something that I want to come back to later, because I know you've gone on to have your unsuccessful life in business, and I want to talk about some of the values and inner voices, as you said there, and as it relates to having success in business and in producing this film, because my passion is making documentaries, so this conversation is a little bit selfish for me, just in terms of how you pulled this off. And so
it was definitely that. I would say that it was, a triple overtime match. And, really unique in a sense when you tell people, hey, I'm going to do something that's really unique, and I'm going to, create a film about, this program and about these people in this community. And obviously they would be correct in saying, are you sure you want to do this? Because first and foremost, how much experience do you have? 0. Who do you know? Not too many people in this industry, and then secondly, well, what's the budget going to be, and how are you going to film, and what are the angles going to be like, and how do you get people involved, and how do you start something like this? And what's really unique, Ryan, is that when this all came about, this was in May of 2016, and the season was starting in November of 2016 when this streak was really on the line. And so that required an immense amount of work to be done quickly to even just, get people to believe that you can do it. And so I think obviously because of my athletic career, people probably thought, okay, well, if anybody can do it, he's overcome a lot of other challenges and stuff, and, he'll probably get it done, but are you really going to do this with like an iPhone, or what are you going to do in order to pull something like this off? And it's a major, major accomplishment. I have had great people that I've been associated with and become lifelong friends with through it. So I look forward to touching base a little bit more about that.
So how did you decide, how did you decide on the director and like who was going to shoot it and all that? Cause it's, it's obviously done super top notch, high end stuff here. So how'd you get in touch with the director?
Yeah. So I had a really good friend of mine who's my business partner in this endeavor. His name is Bruce Louisi. And he happened to play football at USC and then went on to play in the pros. And so his family was part of the entertainment movie business in Los Angeles. And so he and I had been speaking, for a number of years through our friendship. And I told him, I said, look, do you know anybody? And he, of course, said, yes, I can connect us with a few people. So originally he got me connected with a gentleman named Tim Vandestieg, who unfortunately passed away mid part of our filming process and editing. That was one of the challenges that we overcome. And then I got connected to a group, and his name was Jim Orr, was our original director of photography. He had worked on several different projects, and we put a team together, rented the necessary equipment, and we started doing interviews and filming with all of our B-roll filming in November of 2016.
How many different interviews do you think you did?
I think we probably did about 30 to 34 interviews overall. We really filmed about 200 hours of footage, and then refined that and edit it to feature film length. And so the documentary is actually 82 minutes and change.
And did the director edit it as well?
So my original director that was working with us on the project, we parted ways after the first session. Mm-hmm. And one of the original producers and editors became our director. His name is Sergio Valenzuela. He's in Nashville, Tennessee. He was originally connected through Tim and his team, and he did a fantastic job, really immersed himself in the content and what the sport was all about. And then connecting with the right people to interview. You got to have credibility voices, of course, and that's, the likes of Rich Bender and Leroy Smith and Dan Hodge and Mike Chapman are just a few of our people that we have in the film. But then, I think people really want to hear from the kids, the people that are participating and feeling what the pressure is like, and, trying to win their own individual state championship as long as keep a team streak alive. So those are all of the credibility points and past coaches that went into the film.
And when you say the first wave, was there like a second wave where you thought maybe this wasn't going to go through and you had to kind of restart things, or what do you mean by that?
Yeah, actually we did. So in kind of changing a little bit of the direction from a director's point of view, it did require us, to, in a sense, recalibrate what we needed to accomplish, what was most important to come out. And it became, as a former, athlete in the sport of wrestling, you're very disciplined, and the structure had to really be there. And so that's what we implemented, what I wanted to see from a vision standpoint come about, especially with specific topics and what needed to come from each of the interviews.
Mm-hmm. No, it's just, interesting thinking about if you started in 2016 and at that time your guns blazing, you probably would have never thought it'd be 2021. And if you did, you would have said, I'll never do this. It's like just such a long time, and knowing how much goes into it. What were some of the obstacles you had to overcome that bubbled up that people may not know about?
Yeah, well, but one of the number one things is the unfortunate passing of Tim Vandestieg in the middle of our production. The second part of it is really, as Ryan, getting it across the finish line. You can actually get a lot of content filmed, but when you create something and then you write it, you have to pull all of the pieces together so that there's a flow to the film. And I would tell you that through the editing process, that required an immense amount of work and not so much a delay, but, finding the time when people on my team, and especially myself, having full-time jobs. We were doing this on weekends and on holidays and after 8:00 at night, and flying, to Nashville to do editing and things. That required a lot of additional time and challenge coordinating schedules. And then I think also too, once you get content together, who becomes the distributor? And number one, why should they care? And I've always taken this point is that most people, they're not required to listen. My job is to actually make them care and listen to what it is that we're trying to do. Mm-hmm. And when you tell the right story and you tell people what it's really about, and that in a sense becomes a long interview process as well, getting all of the necessary insurances, getting the right attorneys involved. And there was just a lot of additional expense that was outside the original budget that I had to account for.
What about the music? Did you do a custom score for this? Because I really like the music in it.
We did. And so we had a gentleman named J.D. Andrew that is fantastic. And he has a library of music that is absolutely amazing. I originally was going to do a soundtrack that we would create from scratch from a gentleman that his father wrestled, was a national champion with Dan Gable at Iowa State. And so he happened to be in Nashville. We were originally going to do this, but we changed after that when that part of the film didn't get funded. And so thankfully, having the connection to a gentleman like J.D. Andrew, in fact, it's what's crazy is I was watching the last two Tour de France's, and much of the music that is part of the film, I heard excerpts of it in the actual Tour de France. And so it's wide-ranging music that is fantastic, to say the least.
That's the best part about it, though. Like the music that I use in the Smiths, I just listened to The Last Dance, and I just picked my favorite songs from The Last Dance and had the guy create them as close to that as possible. So like, that's what's cool about the music, is it does seem like it's super professional, and it gives you those competition vibes, so to speak. So that's cool.
It's all original. It's all original from his library that, not many people get access to.
I love it. It is fantastic. And it's something I wrote down that I really enjoyed about it. So when was the last scene, like a camera shot? Were you guys done in 2017, or were you still filming all the way up until recently?
We filmed all the way into mid 2018.
Got it.
And so we captured some additional B-roll from the year 2018 to incorporate into the film. I wanted to have a little bit more, some of the shots, and, kids age pretty quickly, from year to year, especially in high school. And so we wanted to see a little bit of that maturity come after, especially in the post-wrestling interviews, so that people could see, a little bit of that change during this period of time.
And would you go to every interview?
I did. Yes, sir.
Wow.
Absolutely.
So you were you interviewing them, or were your directors doing the interviews?
We both did. Wow.
Interesting. Yeah. The interview itself is such a key piece of it. And if that doesn't go right, you don't have good footage for the film. So you were actually doing each one. Wow. It's so much work. And so you guys were editing for, a good while, which makes sense. Yeah. Given that much content.
It was about 9 to 12 months in totality of editing. As you know, it's just, it's like building a house in some ways, every crook and cranny, every inch, of the house. It's the same sort of thing. Every millisecond, matters. And especially as you piece it together, to ensure that, there's a significant flow. And especially from my perspective, the last 30 minutes of the documentary are key to building about what we needed people to feel, what the pressure was. And that takes, the footage, and it takes the right music in order for people to identify with what these kids were feeling at the time. And especially not only that, but the coaches and the fans, you needed to see their reactions in the stands to losses and, to wins, and especially wins that, needed to come through, and bonus points were required in order to secure or not secure. Those things were on the line throughout the whole entire film.
That's the cool part about it. How did you get Trace Atkins?
You know, I tell you, that's one of the funnest things I think about this film is that I utilized everything that I learned on the wrestling mat, you know, with regard to, you know, extreme commitment and the discipline to keep going when it was extremely hard. But then the age-old adage of 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? Who do I know that would know somebody else that I could start reducing the number of people in between? Mm-hmm. And so guys that were integral to the film, Zach Adams, Mike Stryker, they live in Nashville, and they were so bought in to, you know, what the story entailed that they started helping through that process, and we got to Trace. And, you know, thankfully, his voice is tremendous. His talent is, you know, off the charts, but he responded to my email in less than 24 hours saying, I'm in, I want to do this.
Wow. And then
that was staggering.
Did you have the script ready then for him to read?
Pretty close. Yeah. Cause he requested it. And so there was a few final, you know, things that I wanted to tighten up a little bit, sent it to him and flew it to Nashville, to our studio. And he did it in about an hour. I mean, his talent.
An hour? What?
Quick. 1 hour. Yeah.
So did you write it after you had done most of the editing to know where everything was going to go?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Yep. Wow. Yeah. That is so cool. And so I was going to ask you how that process went. He just read through them and that was it. Banged them out, the lines.
I kid you not, maybe two, at the most 3 times through on all of you know, what we had written.
Love it, man. That is so exciting.
Yeah.
And now it's getting into all these film festivals. Where has it been received so far?
So the first film festival we were accepted to was the Franklin International Film Festival in Nashville, Tennessee. There's 2 big festivals in Tennessee, I should say in Nashville. The Nashville Film Festival and the Franklin International Film Festival. It was recently selected to Miami Film Festival and Montreal, and we just got word and announced it today that it was accepted to the Knoxville Film Festival, which will be held in September. So I'm actually attending that to go through the interview process and have the people that are screening the film where it will be up for more awards, which is great for this is a very diverse audience, I think, you know, which is really unique to be able to get, you know, people outside of the sport that know nothing about it whatsoever, and to be able to tell a story that they can identify with through the sport of wrestling and through what it takes to be able to see it and see a side of things that they've never seen before. And I think that what resonates with what we think will resonate with everybody, what it has previously to this, is community, you know, and values and commitment of people that are really, they want to see it continue and want to see it succeed.
Isn't that the most challenging thing? Like, you want to do something that someone who knows nothing about wrestling can watch it and enjoy it, but you also don't want to offend the wrestling fan by making it too simple, you know, in terms of the wrestling context.
I couldn't agree more, because, you know, our sport is very unique. There's no doubt about it. And there's only a small group of people, you know, that you know, want to participate in the sport. Very, very thankful that women's wrestling is growing so significantly across the country and more programs are being added. But you know, you had to keep, from my perspective, the authenticity of the sport involved. You know, one of the things that I vacillated on was the weight cutting, you know, and having to make weight. And a lot of people outside the sport don't understand why that's so significant. Mm-hmm. But it is unique to wrestling and other sports like MMA and boxing. But keeping the authenticity, you know, front and center, because of the impact, because of the forging that the sport does for its participants, I thought was really vitally important.
Oh, absolutely. It's like, it's the truth of the story. And obviously one of the things that makes wrestling so unique, for better or for worse. And so people are probably, when they meet you who don't know about wrestling, they're probably thinking, gosh, this guy is like, he's a maniac. He's investing all this time in this film. but he's a successful businessman, and I want to hit on that a little bit. So talk me through your journey a little bit. So you go to Perry, obviously, state champ, 2-time state champ.
Yes, sir. 2 times.
Then you get to OU. Tell me about your early years at OU.
Well, I originally went to the Air Force Academy my first year of college, and had some early success. And it really, I had an appetite, given the fact that you had the likes of Jack Van Beber and Dan Hodge, and then other teammates of mine and predecessors to the sport that had gone on and had success at the collegiate level, whether it be in junior college. My father was a junior college national champion and went on to wrestle at Michigan State. We've had several All-Americans and national champions at the NAIA level when that was still part of the designation, and then of course the D3, D2, and D1. And so one of the things that I wrestled with outside of the sport was injuries. I got to the University of Oklahoma, very thankful that, Coach Stan Abel and Jerry Stanley gave me an opportunity to participate and be a student athlete there. I was an NCAA qualifier and Big 8 place winner in 1989. And, honestly, I didn't adapt well to the Division I level. It was really hard. My first match was against Townsend Saunders, and actually had a really good match in the duel with him. And then my next match was Rich Bailey from Cal State. So I got indoctrinated quickly and had a decent year, but nothing that you're going to write home about, of course. And so I think the thing that really plagued me a lot was the plague of injury. I've had a lot of surgeries since that period of time. And I would have liked to have been able to carry on the tradition of having, being an All-American, national champion and moving forward, but that wasn't, really in the cards for me, for better, for worse. But I did take all of those things that I had learned, and I applied them, as we were talking about, to my professional career. And so it started, staying involved in sport was really important to me. I got the opportunity to do Ironman and did triathlon for the last 14 years.
Did you ever do Kona?
I didn't qualify for Kona. As you can imagine, that there's some very gifted, talented athletes, and I hadn't been in the sport for a long time. So I think you need about, a 10-hour or 10.5-hour, finish time to qualify. Absolutely.
Oh, wow. So it's that
qualification.
And I didn't realize how many people do Ironman races. Like they sell out that quickly, right?
They sell out very quickly, usually in about the first, 30 minutes to 2 hours of an event, which is crazy, right? You got to pay $600-700 to do an Ironman event, and so.
What is an Ironman?
Ironman, 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, and a 26.2 mile run.
And how many of those have you done?
I've done one complete Ironman in 2010 and several half Ironmans, Olympics, and the shortest distance races as well. Sprint distances.
Did you do this right after college or after you'd have been in business a while and were looking for something to get the juices going?
I'd been in business for a little while, and what's a lot of people don't really know about it. It's the medical device industry, especially on the trauma side, where you spend countless hours in the operating room and with trauma patients who have broken just about every bone in their body. And you work with orthopedic surgeons to put them back together. So it was a real puzzle, but required what I would say is what I've learned, to describe my personal life and professional life as the 4 A's of personal success. It really takes availability, affability, accountability, and attention to detail. And then I found myself applying those in the sport of wrestling and certainly in my professional life in order for me to create, success. And
so you just looking at your LinkedIn, looks like you have a background in sales. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes,
so did you start at the entry level and just hammered your way up?
I did. So after my collegiate career, I had, several orthopedic surgeons that had become friends of mine, and they introduced me to a company, and they told me I needed to get a little bit of experience. And so, and I was never afraid of challenge, which I think the sport of wrestling helps us all develop, not only the desire, but, you put a goal ahead of you and you're not going to be denied. And that's one great attribute I think about the sport. Well, I said, okay, I'm willing to pick up and move. And so I moved to Dallas, Texas from Oklahoma. And I spent a couple of years, gaining some experience and some achievements. And I came back and said, okay, well, here's, my resume. But the fact of the matter is that when I start with you, it's kind of like a wedding, right? I've done all the work, the wedding takes place, but I got to continue with the marriage. And so I'm willing to continue moving forward. And so they moved me to Oklahoma, and that sparked the last, 27 years of my professional career in the medical device industry. And it's entailed 7 different moves overall. And most recently I moved to Miami, Florida, to take a role with my company here.
When did you move from being individual contributor to like a manager? Like, how long had you been in the field for the first time?
I was asked after 5 years, and I actually said no. I wanted to gain more experience and really, from a leadership perspective, have credibility. And so I decided at the 12-year mark, when our first child was born, that I would start to move into a leadership role. There's a little bit more in my industry. It's a 24/7, 365 on call requirement. And so that gave me a little bit more flexibility, to be present with my family. But
for those 12 years, you were just hammering it, huh? Just out there on the pavement, grinding it out.
There was a time when, my wife and I never drove in the same vehicle when we were dating anywhere, because inevitably I was always going to be called in. And so we never drove in the same car. It required that. I was out for 96 hours at a time sometimes and never came home.
Man, and I got to imagine not many people are as dedicated as that in sales. So you did really well and have moved up. And then, tell me about the challenges of becoming like a C-level guy, like a president, where you're not even in the trenches with the daily wins and losses of the sales anymore. You're dealing with so many other distractions. And for folks who don't know, what is like one of the highest levels you achieved in business, like CEO, president type thing, and what was that experience like?
My official title with my company is Chief Commercial Officer. So I'm responsible for all of the internal and external sales organization. I think the transition goes from, like you mentioned, being an individual contributor to a leader. And a leader requires the ability to influence, but also put the needs of the organization first. So I was able to transition a lot of that from my wrestling career, right? Being on the mat, doing my individual contribution to helping the team win, but then also helping push my teammates to achieve more than they thought possible, in the same way that they were pushing me to do the same thing. And so I think I transitioned pretty naturally to that, being a team captain throughout my time on the mat, and then going into organizations and helping people understand what they're capable of. I think one of the other parts is focus is so important in everything that we do. And you've got to really be disciplined to do the things necessary in order to create the success, because at the end of the day in sales, as the numbers don't lie, and I think Bill Parcells said at one time, our record is who we are. And so that was one thing that I think was key in being able to give back. It's really the same from my perspective about gratitude, giving to my team who I know I've lived the life that they've lived, and I know what they're doing on a daily basis, and I know the sacrifices they make. And so if I can help them from the corporate level be able to attain those goals and make it a little bit easier for them, then that's what my ultimate role is.
Do you miss the eat what you kill, living out there on the road?
Man.
Do you?
Absolutely. I do. As crazy as it sounds, I miss the call.
Yeah.
I miss the call. And, there's nothing like getting a call at 2:00 in the morning on Christmas Day. And, somebody saying, hey, you know what, how I like to operate. Just bring me what I need, what I'm even thinking about. And, let's make sure we take care of this patient. So that's been something that I still enjoy.
And I tell everyone I meet, if you don't have a clear path of what you want to do in life, sales could be the way. Especially, I'm in the business to business software sales game, and and you're obviously a med device, but there's so many avenues for it, but it really just rewards the values that wrestling has. So I love people who are in software sales or certainly med device sales. I have a lot of friends at Stryker, and a mentor, I guess I would say Paul Glenn is a vice president at Stryker based here in Chicago. A lot of Iowa Hawkeyes are hitting the pavement for those guys. And it's like, I don't think people realize that med device sales reps, they're literally in the operating room with the doctor. And that's where the relationship's built, which is just mind boggling to me, because
it is.
That's just that. Yeah. You wouldn't know that as a patient, that the sales rep's going to be in the room, Tell me about once you became a leader, and you seem like a very meticulous man. Like, what was your morning routine? And what are some of the habits you've done consistently over 10, 15 years in leadership and business?
I would tell you that I think one of the most important aspects is organization. Setting clear and defined goals. I always look at it as the requirement of my leadership skill is to be able to cast a vision of the future, but then also give people a line of sight of how to get there. And I think that's what I was able to do, outside my professional career with this film, is have people that knew nothing about the sport be able to identify with a certain aspect of it, but believe in the vision of what we needed to accomplish and how the film could tell this specific story. And so, as I say, to reiterate, casting the vision and then showing people how to get there. I utilize an example a lot of times when our kids were really young. We would take them to do activities. My wife and I would go and we would take them bowling, right? And I would say, okay, the objective is for the ball to go straight and hit pins. That way they can have fun, not get frustrated. In order for us to do that, we had to put the bumpers up, right? So that ball would go straight and hit pins. And so it's a lot from my perspective in the same way is helping them, know what can be accomplished, what time frame it needs to be accomplished in, what resources that you receive in order to do it, and then be able to execute with excellence.
And are you someone who is on the road a lot now in your leadership capacity? Like every week, are you on the road?
Pretty much at least twice a month.
Twice a month.
So we do a lot of educational events, but there's a lot of different meetings that have to take place, whether it's industry events or specific meetings, at hospitals and offices across the globe.
And so the reason I asked was, you mentioned earlier the Ironmans, and I love hearing about routines and tactics. So are you someone who's getting up early and working out at the hotel? I mean, how are you staying in shape later in your career, and especially when you're training for some of those Ironmans?
The key certainly is setting up a structure and a schedule, and being disciplined to get up early. I think as wrestlers, we do that a lot. When we get up on early morning runs, or we go in our cutting weight and managing our weight in the evening times, riding the bike. It didn't matter what time it was. You were just going to do it because you loved it. You wanted it to be part of it. You knew it was going to make a difference. And so, many times when I'm on the road, my hotel, I've got a gym there, and I can either do whatever cardio. It's great if you can find a pool to be able to swim and stuff, but most of them have bikes. And I try to do my weight training during the week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then, riding and swimming, really on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
And I just want to round out the Ironman section with this.
Yeah.
How brutal was the full length one you did? Was it seems some of the darkest darks you ever been in, and then highest highs? I mean, what was it like?
I didn't experience that. I'm thankful and grateful. Even though I'll tell you, the preparatory work up to that point was the hardest part. And so in October of 2009, I had an injury 2 days before a half Ironman that was part of my preparatory work for the following November, when I knew that, would be my first full distance Ironman.
You were that far out, 13 months out?
I was that far out. Absolutely.
Wow.
Because I it takes a lot of time in mileage in order to have your body build up to, those distances. And so I ended up having to have a third procedure on my spine in January. And so as a normal wrestler would, I spoke to my surgeon on that Friday when I knew I had the injury, and I told him that I had a race that I'd already prepared for, and I wasn't going to not do it. I just want to make sure I'm not going to hurt myself further. And he said no. And so, long story short, I had surgery January 10th of 2010, and I was not able to lift more than a half a jug of milk until May. And so I didn't even really get to start training until I was released, in essence, June 1st, to start back training again.
And the race was in November?
It was.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my Lord.
That was a little bit of a rough. So the challenging part was trying to get back into a strong semblance of shape in order to be able to do that. But the race that day was much like, I would equate it to, wrestling in the state finals, where all the prep work has gone in, and that's your day to shine. And so it took me 12 hours to do Ironman. And I remember one of the ultimate things was that I wanted to hear Mike Riley say, "Chance Leonard, you are an Ironman." And I don't know how it happened, from the standpoint of there was nobody around me when I came through this long finishing chute that you see, on most of these events. And I happened to just be by myself. And, he obviously does a great job of calling people's names out, which is incredibly invigorating. And, to cross the finish line, hearing that was something that was a great day.
And were you a runner before this? Or was this
nothing more than what we did training for wrestling? And so I had never swam. I had never swam. And so I had to teach myself and go to some master's classes for swimming, but I didn't start swimming until I was, 41 years old.
I was going to ask you, so did you hire a trainer who had done this before?
No, I did it all myself.
Just research it all on your own?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So at the peak of it, what was like your running workload? Were you doing a marathon a day type thing, or?
No, I would say, the longest pre-race run was 20 miles, associated with, several 100-mile bike rides and, a few thousand meters in the pool. Would get to the point, and then most recreational athletes, in a sense like me, you have a taper period, a week and a half, 2 weeks before. But so those were the longest at the time. So I'd never run a marathon previous to that.
Oh my Lord, that's crazy. So I did, there was a period in my life about 3 years ago where I did my first marathon and then did a 30-mile race, a Spartan race. And so I was excited about that. And I was really loving that whole, like that ultra endurance community. Yeah. The thing is just the amount of time it takes to get ready to run. I mean, and then you factor on that you're doing the swimming and the biking. I just can't imagine how people have the time for training for that, because that's at least 4 to 6 hours every Saturday.
Oh yeah, at least. But I remember there were times, especially I lived in Arizona at that time, and we would get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and ride until 9 a.m. It'd take 6 hours, to do that day's training ride, because it was just too hot the other point in time. So
you said you start training in June, so July, August, September in Arizona.
Yeah.
Wow, that is
hot.
That's brutal. Well, Chance, this has been a lot of fun, and I appreciate you coming on here. I am excited for people to go watch the film, The Price of Legacy. I appreciate the preview you shared. I guess I should say, how can people watch it, or is it not available yet to the general public?
Yeah, I actually released June 15th. And so it's on all of the major platforms on video on demand. So you can get it on Apple iTunes, you can get it on Google Play, you can get it on YouTube Movies. We're still trying to work out the agreement with Amazon Prime. We were originally supposed to be on Amazon Prime, and they kind of moved the goalposts on us, so to speak. So we're trying to get that up. But, what I would ask is that, we are at a uncharted territory time from my perspective with marketing of the sport of wrestling. And so I think that, people can reach us on all of our social media pages, whether it be on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. Go like the pages, share it with your friends. We have a campaign that, speaking of getting up early, I always get up every morning early and I do all the advertising myself and put together all of the social media posts and stuff. But the more people that we could actually have watched the film, the higher that it goes on all of these video on demand platforms. And so recently we were number 2 on all of the documentaries on iTunes and Google Play, which is staggering for our sport.
That's insane.
We've got a very diverse group of people that, can watch the film and get access to it. And so we kind of have to create a real organic and viral response. And that requires as many people that are fans of the sport watch the film, share it with their friends. We've even got, Trace Atkins is been a huge proponent for us and he's sharing it. I'm working with a couple other voices within Hollywood to hopefully get a couple very large name shout out videos. But you can find us, as I say, on all the social media pages and all the video on demand platforms.
I love it. If you're a wrestling fan and if you're listening to this, please watch this film. It's like, this is just done because you love wrestling and you love Perry and you want to share all these messages. So it's an awesome thing. And I'm just glad that we finally get to connect. Chance, thanks again for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Ryan, thanks so much. Enjoyed my time with you very much.
And that's the end of this episode of Wrestling Changed My Life. Thank you so much for tuning in. To watch the full video interview, go to YouTube, Wrestling Changed My Life. And that's it. We'll see you next time.